section has been like one of the most exciting and interesting things for me, instead of being kind of in a echo chamber where I'm only kind of having these conversations with people that already think this way. So that's been a fun opportunity that kind of goes into why I thought this might work here.
Great.
So are you the only, like, how many employees, or are you the only person who?
Just me. But now we have, as of last weekend, because I had to go away to a wedding in California, we hired a gallery sitter. So there is a young woman named Anna Crone who has been sitting in the gallery the last 2 weekends, so I had to be here 7 days a week, which has been really exciting to have. I was here yesterday, actually got the New York Times writer to come. I don't know, I'm not but got him to come see the space, which is really exciting. Just getting people up here and letting them know that this is not just a defunct IBM campus is like been half the battle. Probably the biggest challenge also in convincing the development company that this is working is because we've only been open for such a short time, getting the word out and getting people to know that we're here has been kind of the difficult part. But once we do that, people's reactions when they come in is just overwhelmingly excited, especially like local families. They're thrilled to have a place to bring their kids. People who have artist studios around here that would love the idea of like a community that's here and not Beacons or Poughkeepsies. That was another interesting thing about kind of figuring out why I really felt strongly about it being an art center rather than like a historical visitor center or just a maybe community gallery space, was that there's nothing between Beacon and Poughkeepsie that's like cultural, in the sense that there's like a rec center and there's a library, which is essential, but there's like 100 galleries in Cold Spring and Beacon. There's so many in Newburgh, and then there's Poughkeepsie's having this like huge uprising of all this art, and there's just nothing in between. Hopewell Junction, that's right here, doesn't even have a main street, and they have a massive community. So even just creating a space for people to come together that feels more in their community, and especially this was like a massive void that had huge economic consequences, right? There was 30,000 people working here, went down to 2,000. Like, not only did they leave this kind of devastatingly large kind of industrial wasteland, but all those people lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Like we've seen the impact of that all throughout the Hudson Valley. From Poughkeepsie has an IBM campus, Kingston has an abandoned IBM campus. So just having the opportunity to reinvigorate this space and make it something valuable to the people around it has been really exciting.
Gotcha. You mentioned a collaboration with the Artifact.
Yeah.
Now, and also an interest in food justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that there's a social justice component to your mission as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the sort of social justice component of your mission playing out?
I think right now it's creating space for conversations and giving voice to people that otherwise we were seeing that didn't have a voice in the conversation, or at least in a conversation that had interdisciplinary stages and impacts. As for the Artifact, right now we have a whole high school art show in the gym hallway, which we call the gym hallway, but we turned it into a gallery space in order to be able to show young people's art. And it's like there's CAD-cut vinyl labels, it was all professionally hung. So giving them a space to show their work has been really exciting, giving other arts organizations that otherwise don't have the ability to or the funding to get the art into other locations other than their singular galleries or schools has been really fun.
Yeah.
And then working with the farmers has been really important. Karen Washington is an activist and farmer who has a farm up here and in the Bronx. Getting to work with her and feature her in the film was massively important. We also have Jalal Sabur, who runs a Sweet Freedom Farm, which does a lot of social justice work, a lot of bringing food to prisons. They're kind of one of their slogans is farms, not prisons, and the work around there. So being able to support them by just creating a stage and giving them a voice that expands past their audience already has been really great. So that's been part of it right now.
So what's your mission in terms of like how many people you want to try to bring to this space to really center those voices, as it seems you're kind of shooting to do?
To create numbers has been hard. I think that's what the development company would love, for me to be able to set numbers and goals. I think right now it's just about building. I think it's two things. I think one, it's about building a community of people that are really dedicated to working with the programming and the stuff we're doing here, finding people whose work naturally already kind of aligns with it, and getting that kind of core group of people that want to be involved in the large-scale installation, that want to be in love with the film programming, that want to come and host talks and lectures and that sort of thing. So creating that group of people, and then after that, it's getting the word out to everyone and getting all sorts of people to come in and engage and find something that they're interested in within this context. And whether that's originally coming to get a sandwich from one of the vendors when we have something in here, and then maybe they wander through the gallery and have interest in learning more, like that's going to be just as important, I think, as the people that are intentionally seeking out this experience or coming up for the weekend.
Yeah. And I know we're going to do a little walkout here. Is part of the plan to kind of build sort of a natural space where people can come, and not just for sort of like reasons of commerce, but to kind of gather in the woods, thinking of it almost kind of like parkland?
I mean, that would be my ideal. It's a lot of kind of seeing how you align a nonprofit vision led by a poet with the real estate and development.
Well, and I think my questions are kind of like drifting in that direction, and I want to learn. I want to learn more about that. You know, because that's slippery ground, right? That's a complicated place to. That's a complicated space to occupy.
It is. It is. So, and that is kind of hitting its real point of tension with this food hall. Being that it's of course their money and their space, so, and I'm more than grateful to occupy the gallery that we have, but my idea circling around this food hall is like, can we make this more than just a commercial space?
Yeah.
And do we really need another food hall? Like, yes, should the people on this campus that want a public facing presence, and this was kind of a part of their lease, that in the future they're going to build something this out, like, yes, it would be great for them to have an ability to do that and be open here. But I've been thinking a lot around what it would be like to have a prep kitchen that people could rent out in order to start testing their business ideas, or a prep kitchen that farmers could use to do whatever kind of basic preparation they would need to be able to, say, sell to a school. So maybe that's just washing, cutting, and packaging. What would it be like to have a freezer storage here for the farmers to do farmers markets? What would it be like to have an indoor farmers market? What are the other ways we can utilize this space that can go hand in hand with a commercial space, with a retail space? But what are ways we can build it out to be a much more community oriented hub that would actually kind of put into action the ideas that we're playing with in the gallery? Like, my dream would be that would be our ideas, that would be our big thinking, that would be our aesthetic appreciation, that would stimulate the conversation, be a catalyst for action, but in there we could literally enact the things we're talking about. Like, we could literally be having programs where we were doing cooking classes with schools about healthy eating. We could have a test in a prep kitchen. We could have freezer storage. We could have a space that farmers could come and utilize during the winter months for a market setup if they had the bandwidth and the produce to do so. So those are kind of, that's the dream. Who knows what'll happen next, honestly. But that would be my ideal in that space, which would really bind the two together rather than just saying, we have some art at our food hall.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I have a question. So the developer is financing the whole project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are financing the art center right now. We have to build a board, and by we I mean I have to build a board and start putting together a development plan that would make us financially sustainable. But that is kind of part of the process. Right now, the biggest push was to get the building built, to curate a first show, to host an opening, host a big harvest festival, produce the film, get the screening room done, start creating some buzz and getting some attention, so people were coming out here showing the development company that like this could be a really meaningful endeavor that will attract people and will bring them to the greater IE Park campus. And next step will be like, okay, so how do we become financially independent?
Gotcha.
I want to hear more about that. How do we become financially sustainable?
I would love to tell you that I know.
Come back in 3 years.
You know, I have
You know that now. Just financially sustainable.
the like real like reach dream. I'm just gonna keep using the bad metaphor pie in the sky. Would be like, I want IBM to fund it. I want IBM to endow it because I want to be like, look, we are reinvigorating this space that you left behind, all the economic consequence. Like, give back a little bit. And I'm like, a cool $3 million, that's nothing for you. Like, come on. They're like still making items that they're selling and making a profit and they're publicly owned, right? There's stock options. Like, you can fund my 3,200 square foot art center. So that would be ideal. I would love to just get it endowed at least for the first 3 years to really get it into itself, see how it'll take off. But other than that, I think building out a board of people that kind of know a little better about what they're doing than I do.
Fundraising.
Yeah, I think fundraising will go into it. Yeah, I think a lot of the larger art institutions around here are endowed. I think that's how they're able to have such high level programming. So I've been advised that that's really, especially for a starting point, until we're well known enough that we would have enough of a community that could step up and help us fundraise and like be a part of that process. So we will see what's next.
Yeah.
We're all in it together. Waiting with bated breath.
At this point, do you know how committed the developer is with this project? Or because eventually if they see that it's a good investment because all the other outcomes that can come from this, maybe they can give you that endowment that you need. Or I don't know if they are, obviously the fact that they took your project saying, yes, let's do it, says like a lot.
Yeah.
But how far that will go, you have no idea.
I have no idea.
Wow.
We have 4 shows booked for next year. So through next year, I think there's going to be a building out of a team that will need to happen. I think something going in there is going to be really helpful, especially if that can be a fusion of both commercial, so there is some sort of profit-driven aspect to it, but also then this community aspect that can put what happens in there into practice. So I think moving in that direction is probably what they'll be looking at next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you choose, you mentioned something about choosing the artists, some locally, some, in different cities.
Yeah.
What's your criteria, or how do you choose the artists that you're, do you have someone that you're asking about art, or do you just have an eye for art, or how do you?
Excellent question. So I'd never curated a show before, and I'd never worked in visual arts at all before. All I knew is that what I know is how to make a narrative. I know how to write a story, and I decided that the best way to go about this was to create a narrative arc and then to fill it in with art from people whose work I'd already known or who I would come to discover in the last few months. I was really blown away by the artists that were willing to lend me their work. Were non-commercial, so they weren't going to make any money from it. And if anything, it was like we were paying for the transport for most of them, but a lot of the artists, knowing that we were on a tight budget, brought the art and installed it themselves, which was amazing. But once, I never in the world thought Jean Shin would be like, oh yeah, here, you can have my art. I didn't even have a building. I didn't have a facility report. I had no curator experience. And I was just like, I really like your work. Would you talk to me on the phone? And then once we got Gina B, just bigger artists that were well known, people just started saying yes. And maybe based on 5 of the first works I confirmed that I could place throughout the gallery, it was a matter of developing the story between them. Yeah, and it was pretty organic, and honestly I had no idea what was going to happen. especially like at the point where I had like 15 artworks and it was all kind of disparate and mixed media and the colors were all over the place. I was like, well, this is a failure already, and I only have half of it done. And it came, you know, it came to be what it is, and it was a learning experience that was overwhelmingly positive in terms of working with the artists. Like, we had a few artists that made work for the show. All those clementines, the 500 ceramic clementines in different states of decay, that was my first ever artist studio visit during COVID in Newburgh. This artist named Daniel Giordano, and I walked into his studio, which was an abandoned garment factory that he turned into his studio. And he had maybe like 3 or 4 of these clementines, like the really kind of more simple ones. And we're talking, and I was like, any way you'd want to make me like 500 of these? And he was like, sure. And I was like, there's no way. And literally 2 months later, he calls me up and he said, so I'm at like 257. They're starting to get a little crazy, but I'm going to have 500 for you. So like that whole process was like really, really fun. I'm going to tell you right now, the logistics of fine art transport and insurance are an absolute nightmare. I had no idea what I was getting into when I had to get, I think there's 35 works from 30 different artists from all over the place and get them here and insured and on time. That was absolutely nuts. Was I unpacking artwork 2 days before the opening at like 3 in the morning? Like, absolutely. Googling how to hang art, like that was happening all the time. I was Googling the crazy, like how many outlets in a gallery? Like I had no idea they were building it, and I really didn't know what it was gonna look like. I wasn't involved in the construction aspect at all, but they would ask me stuff like, what kind of lighting do you want? And I was like, bright kind, but the kind that like doesn't hurt art, and like just like finding all that stuff out was really crazy. Me like screwing in outlet covers was like a highlight for sure. I was on the ground taping down all our cords, the extension cords, right before the opening, so all the photos we had the opening, I just have dust from here to here, and all the pictures was crawling around on the ground, and there was still like plaster. We got our permit for occupancy the morning of our opening, where we had 50 people here. It was like absolute nuts. But then having 250 people come in for the opening, I was like, there's going to be 20 people here, and I'm going to be standing here alone in this ridiculous dress. And having everyone here, it was amazing. Like, it was worth like all the craziness.